Hey everybody, it's Avi Tenenbaum. I got an email here from a very special person who follows TFRP. They asked a really solid question. And I think a lot of people have the same question, so I'm going to tell you kind of out loud what their question was and an initial thought to help answer it. So first of all, I love when people from TFRP ask questions. Anytime you have a question, send it to tfrpgroup@gmail.com, and Shoshi, who helps me to run TFRP, she'll check it out and she'll let me know about it. So somebody writes that they're a abuse survivor from the Orthodox community. They have a lot of trauma when it comes to learning Torah. It used to be a very positive experience. Now it's very difficult. And their relationship with God is very complex. How does he stand by and let injustice happen? Right? That's a pretty common thing that a lot of from people feel when things like bad things happen to them, right? And now he's running into a life issue because as he gets older, he needs to learn Torah with his children, but he has this terrible experience with Torah based on whatever it is that he went through. And he says, and when he's learning, it seems like there's so much rigidity and closed-mindedness, and it just rubs him off the wrong way. And then he suggests some ideas of, maybe I could make a video this way, that way, different ways to try to help with this. And then he mentions the story of Akeres Yitzchak is something that I struggle with. So, really interesting, Akeres Yitzchak. It's a great example, and it's actually coming up next week. I've been fighting for a long time just to make this video. I stole some time with Shabbos, so very timely because we have Akeres Yitzchak coming up next week. It's my Bar Mitzvah Parsha. So let's jump in like this. Let's say that when we go through trauma, whether it's a person that has complex trauma or single incident trauma, a late onset trauma, it's something from childhood, and we get into the trauma mind. So then what happens is everything we see is through the lens of our trauma beliefs and lens, right? So it's like we have dirty glasses, and everywhere we look, we're seeing things through the way we perceive it, which is arguably warped and certainly not regular due to the trauma that we went through. And until that trauma is resolved on all of its layers for years in a row, and that's a really long haul. That's a long avoda to do, right? Until we do that, we need to at least be aware of the idea that reality that we're looking at is our traumatic, tainted reality. And it's not necessarily the reality of the Torah, and what we're reading isn't necessarily what appears to be true. And just like when you look in the mirror on the side of your car and it says, objects in the mirror are larger than they may appear, right? Because you're looking in a certain sort of place, and in that place, things don't look exactly the way they're meant to, right? I remember some trauma that I had when I was younger, and I would project this trauma onto a really nice guy in yeshiva who never did a single thing wrong to me. But he triggered for me a lot of cues or memories that reminded me of a very bad person to me. So their attributes were similar. And so let's say that person was 6 feet tall, he was 6 feet tall. And that person was a squeaky voiced person, and this one was too. Whatever the physical cues were or personality traits. What was different about them was he was Reuven and he was Shimon, he was good and he was bad, he was safe and he was not safe. But in my trauma mind at that time, it was all the same. And so we need to first understand we're seeing the world in a warped reality. That's not our fault. We don't have to feel bad about that. And it may take many years to fix. But A, it can be fixed. And B, since that's the case, we need to understand that the things we have a problem with, more often than not, it's because of the way we're viewing it, and not necessarily because of the way it is. And this is a famous Yerushalmi, and I always quote it, and it says, Im reikhu mikemhu. If it is empty, it's because it's empty from you, right? If you approach something in the Torah and it's lacking, it's because something about that you needed to relate to it properly is lacking in you. And therefore, when you approached this, you were lacking some piece of knowledge or experience to help properly understand this in the right context. Okay? So, I'm going to drop a few points on this. One of them is that when we have positive relationships and proper attachment, then we have a model of love and of awe or respect or fear, or call it what you want, ava, yira. When we see our parents having a good marriage, we have a model of what marriage looks like. When we have parents and rabbeim that are healthy, good role models that are mechanech their kids in the right way, then we have a model of what chinuch looks like. And so we learn from our upbringing and from growing up and from the world at large how things are meant to look, what they're supposed to be like. And then we develop beliefs about that. And then we take those beliefs onwards into life. And so if I was severely traumatized as a kid, let's say, and now I have complex PTSD, my relational reality of the world is warped, and I'm certainly not going to be able to make a relationship with God because I have a really messed up paradigm of relationships. And God is a relationship because He's an entity. And this is one of the things I touched on a little bit in my Burned Out video, is that the Torah is a relationship. God is a relationship. I'm not going to call Him a person because He's not a person, but He's a being that we make a relationship with. Torah is something you make a relationship with. And so if you don't have a paradigm for relationships, you're not going to be able to make one, not with the coffee barista on your corner and also not with God. So it's not necessarily a Torah issue, it's a trauma issue. And this is going to be the same thing with content that we read in the Torah, which it could be that evokes for us ideas that this is very rigid and unnecessarily difficult and burdensome and unrealistic and all that. But I wonder if we would be studying something else, we would also be seeing it through a trauma lens. So maybe science would look different, or history, or political science or something like that. And now all of a sudden you're going to misunderstand and misread and misrepresent the political sides of some debate, and you're going to view somebody as really bad, and maybe they're not so bad, but they remind you of something that traumatized you, and so now you're going to look at it in this unbalanced way. So trauma clouds the way we see reality. So it's not only about Torah, it is also about Torah, maybe especially about Torah, but it's not particularly only about Torah. And what I'm saying is, when we approach a story like Akeres Yitzchak, which is an incredible story, and I'm inspired by that story, and I'm certainly not traumatized by the story. So, the reason why the person in this video is traumatized by that story is because something about that story evokes for them trauma based on the traumatic beliefs that they have. So, let's say, for example, that person went through trauma because of an authority figure or a father. And let's pretend, because I don't know, I'm making it up, but let's pretend that this person was beaten up by their father. He would hit them with a belt and smash them and beat them up and curse them and threaten them. And the paradigm of a father is a very bad thing because his father was bad for him. But that's all he knows, because you only have one father, right? Unless you were gifted to have another father-type figure, and that's part of your recovery. But in general, abused people have one biological father, and that becomes the paradigm for fathers. And now, when I read a story about a father, which Avram is a father, and I see he's interacting with Yitzchak, who's a son, and he's using a knife on him, we're going to interpret this in the wrong way, and we're going to say, oh my God, a father wanting to kill his son. That reminds me, maybe subconsciously, but it reminds me of my father hitting me with a chair, my father hitting me with a belt, my father threatening me. So we're now approaching the Parsha from trauma mind. But that's not how anyone in Klal Yisrael approaches that Parsha, because they don't have trauma, right? So people without trauma are going to read a different story. It's going to be the same words, it's going to be the same trup, the same Rashi, the same Ramban, the same this, the same that. The same people, same events, but they have a different background that they're bringing to the story that's going to help them relate to it properly. So somebody with a healthy father who absolutely loved them and took care of them and was a good father figure and a male figure for them. And they were a good son back, and they had this beautiful relationship together. And they do everything together, and they're in tandem of their values. And then they both go into this story where God says to Abraham, Avram, I want to test how loyal you are to me. Go to the place that I'm going to show you. Sacrifice your son that you love, not your son that you abuse, your son that you love. And then the son who he loves is also going to be tested. So now he's going to have the willingness to comply because he loves God and he loves his father. So that's a totally different story than Avram is being violent to his son, right? So it's like from east to west, black and white, complete opposites. So again, what I'm saying is, when we have trauma, we view the world in a virtual reality that isn't there. This can take many years to deal with. On a very technical DSM level trauma treatment, you're going to receive therapy for trauma that's going to be based on symptom reduction very often, and when enough of the symptoms dull down enough, then you're better. But the truth is, it takes many, many years to get rid of trauma, and you may still be stuck with some of it, but it's a long haul. It's a worth it haul. It's very worth it. So what I'm saying isn't to make you feel down. It's very worth the journey. It's an incredible gift. That's part of post-traumatic growth, is that we're meant hopefully to orient ourselves after trauma to a way where the trauma uplifts us and makes us better and greater as people. Right? And if you didn't learn about post-traumatic growth, go check that out. Google it, learn about it, ask your therapist about it, find out how to get on that boat and travel to that destination. But we should at least be aware that we're seeing things different. And we should be patient that it's going to take a long time. And we should hold on to the truth that there's a beauty to this, just I can't see it. But I'm going to pursue it. I'm going to be persistent. And if I keep working at it, I'll eventually get it. If you do that, you're going to be a hero. You're going to be very brave. It's going to be your Akedas Yitzchak. It's going to be a sacrifice. It's not simple. But that's how you're going to get to the truth. If you made it that far and you cling to the truth, what most people do is they say, to heck with this, the Torah is garbage. Or what it really means is, and then they just completely redact the truth and make it mean something that it never meant. And that's not necessary. The Torah is beautiful. Torah is sweet. You experienced it as being sweet, it's still just as sweet. The taste didn't change. Hold on to that truth and work towards it. How do you work towards it? With all the means that you have. I'm not going to tell you how. You'll know how. Hashem should help you. You'll have therapy. You'll be doing your mindfulness meditation and your EMDR and your, watching therapeutic videos. I don't know how. Everyone has their pathway to recovery. So I can't prescribe that to someone else. But what I know is, if you hold on to the truth that the Torah is beautiful, it still is just as beautiful, and I want to work towards getting back there. Let me identify what are the obstacles getting in my way. Why is it that way? What can I do about it? And when you become analytical like that, then you can start to strategize. You can say, oh, it's because I'm seeing the Torah through the lens of my abusive father. Oh, let me think about a positive father figure. Oh, well, that Rebbe I had in 7th grade, I never had such a person that loved me so much and was so good to me. He changed my whole life. That could be an example of a father figure. Oh, so maybe Avram was more like that guy. Right? So we start to play with this and figure this out and solve it. So it's not something that's going to happen in one night. but it's really something doable, and it's something that over months, over years, you can get there. Okay? And the same thing with the beauty of the Torah. I'll tell you a tiny story and we'll finish the video for now. I hope I addressed all your questions, and if not, feel free to ask again, of course. TFRPgroup@gmail.com. But I was with my sons in shul, and after shul, my 10-year-old was standing next to me, and there's a beautiful Talmud Chacham in the shul. If I had permission, I would say these people's names. I don't know if they like the Pearson being on a video. But he's just a sweet, sweet American Talmud Chacham who davens in my shul. And he calls me over, he says, "You want to hear a vort?" And he tells me like 3 or 4 divrei Torah on Lech Lecha. And he's laughing, and he's mamish. You would have thought he took ecstasy. He was so overjoyed. He said, "And you know why it says mikedem twice?" And then he says the pshat. And he's laughing, and he's smiling. So when we finished, my 10-year-old, who's just a kid, right? He says, "Abba, why was Rabbi so-and-so so happy?" That's a pretty good question for a 10-year-old kid. That's an innocent question, right? I said, "You know why? You know your remote-controlled airplane that you bought on AliExpress? You love your remote-controlled airplane, so Rabbi so-and-so, Rabbi G, he loves Torah even more than that." And just like when you're mesachek, when you play with that remote-controlled plane, you don't want to take a shower, you don't want to go home to eat. It's just the most enjoyable experience for you. You never want it to end. When Rabbi G says over a Dvar Torah based on a Torah Shlema Medrash that he saw in Parshas Lech Lecha on why it says Kedem twice, that's even more fun for him than your plane is for you. So he was laughing and he was smiling. That's why. That is the relationship that Rabbi G has to Torah. It's relational. It's relational. Okay? So let's try to understand, why am I viewing the Torah with such rigidity? Because when I read Torah nowadays, it's not rigid. There was a time I viewed it that way. I'm going to get a little bit into this in this video. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I have to tell you, these are conversations we're going to have 150, 200 times over the next few years on TFRP. So we're going to keep hashing this out. We're going to keep getting the details down. I actually met a very special firm professional. I'm not going to reveal their identity yet, but they're actually launching very special initiatives to break these issues down for firm people and define exactly how religious trauma works, and to kind of operationalize it in a way that we'll be able to use the structure that they create to help people work on this in a quicker, easier way. So we wish them a lot of atzlacha. They're doing such holy work. Hashem should give them siyata d'shmaya. But what I wanted to say is, we view the Torah as onerous and difficult and unreasonable and strict and rigid when we have rigid thinking. And that's like what Chazal say, Kal ha-paisel b'mumai paisel, right? When you see something negative, it's usually because you have a problem in your mind and you're seeing it through your mind. Another part of this is that when we don't see the Torah speaking to us on a practical level and it's not fitting our situation, that turns God into an unfair being, my situation into being an uphill, unfair battle, and the Torah being this complete load of BS, which is unfair. And that's because we don't understand, chas v'shalom, I have to add a chas v'shalom to that, and that's because we don't understand, the truth is, you have the same starting point, and I've said this in 50 TFRP videos, and I'll say it again, and again, and again, and again, till my dying day. The starting point is, God is a loving God, and He put you in this situation, and He understands what you're going through because He created it, and He knew this was good for you, and you even signed off on it. That's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, by the way. So, now, God knows that you have trauma, it's hard for you to get up in the morning, it's hard for you to stop looking at pornography, it's hard for you to, not repeat Kriya Shema, whatever it is everyone's going through, it's hard for you to go to shul, whatever the thing is, the social anxiety, that's why you can't go to shul, God knows. When we don't factor in that God knows, and that God is an understanding and loving God, then what we're essentially saying is God is a very bad guy. He put me in this situation, he demands that I go to shul, and he knows I have social anxiety, so it's completely unfair, and it's impossible. And what does he want from me? It's so not fair, and he's so bad. And how did he let this injustice happen? And how does he expect for me to keep these laws? It's so rigid and difficult. Notice that I made a very mean face when I said that. But what if we said, that's your nisayon, and that's going to bring out the best in you, and this is a long journey, and maybe there's room in the halacha for even you. And you need to consult with your Rav about it. You know, all day I hear therapists around the world, they're speaking to Rav David Cohen in America, they're speaking to Rav Asher Weiss in Eretz Yisrael, the big Dolim and Rabbanim that understand how to take the Torah and take mental health issues and make space for you. Make space for your problem. And it's not so rigid anymore, because there's room even for you, and even for your struggle. And I'm making this up, yeah? But maybe for the guy with social anxiety, the Rav is going to say, you know, go to therapy and work on it, and for now, with your therapist's permission and consultation, maybe you should work on just davening in a shul once a week. And maybe you should just stand outside when no one's looking. And maybe that is your tefillah. And that's good enough. And to Hashem, this will be like a carbon oila. And this will be the greatest thing. This will be your Akeres Yitzchak. And so you're busy shaming yourself thinking, this is not worth anything, and I can't do what I'm supposed to, and when can I ever be normal, and it's not fair, and the halacha is so hard, and there's no room for me. Maybe there's tons of room for you. Really go find out, I promise you. Diracheha darche noyam, v'kol nesivaiseha shalom. Lo'nitna Torah l'malachei hasharis. Aynes rachmana patra. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on. And I'm not saying to be irresponsible and say, oh, see, Avi said we don't have to keep the Torah, we have mental health issues. That's not what I said. But what I'm saying is, you know what Hashem wants from you at any given moment? Whatever you can do. And whatever you can do, do. And you should do, and you should enjoy that. And you should try that. And you should work towards a higher level of health. The highest level of health you can get with your psychiatrist and your psychologist and your 12-step groups and your whatever you have and whatever you need. And hopefully you'll be able to upgrade what that looks like over time. And if you don't, you died a hero. You died keeping the Torah, and you're beautiful. And your maisim are beautiful. You know, this reminds me of like 100 stories with Rav Levi Zagav Barditchev and the Baal Shem Tov. How many Hasidic stories do we know of, you know, the person who got the gilui that the greatest Pesach Seder was held by Shimon. Who's Shimon? Let's go find him. And then they go find him, and he's a complete drunk. Right? And why was his Pesach Seder so great? Because it was Erev Pesach, and he realized that he has chametz all over the house. It was 25 bottles of Jack Daniels, so he drank all the bottles at once. He was mamash shikar, and he slept through, you know, the entire night. In the last hour before Alos HaShachar, his wife woke him up and said, Shimon, Shimon, it's almost morning, you better do the Seder. And he quickly did the Seder. Gavaldik, what an incredible Pesach Seder. Right? That's like the typical Hasidic story, and yes, I'm paraphrasing a real story. Those stories are true. And that was the greatest guy in Klal Yisrael. And this is what the Gemara says, Aylam hafach ra'isi. I'm forgetting right now where that Gemara is. I don't prepare scripts, and I don't have like a teleprompter for this. This is just me talking from my heart, okay? But one of the Tanoim, was it Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? No, it was not him. Rabbi Yeshua? No. Don't worry. You'll write it in the comments. How's that? Went up to Shammai. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. I think it's him. I'd put my money on that. I think it was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Went up to Shammai and came down and said, Aylam hafach ra'isi. Everything in Shammai was the opposite. All the people that were like the famous big chashuv people, they weren't too important in Shammai. But the downtrodden, the broken people, the real people as I call them, that are struggling with their social anxiety and can barely get out to shul, those are the greatest people in Shamayim. They have Akeres Yitzchaks every hour, every day, every time they do anything. So it's mamish the opposite. And when we understand that our core beliefs were infected by trauma, and we tackle them one at a time and remove them, another one, and we replace them with real core beliefs of the truth of the beauty of ourselves and our actions and the Torah and the expectations of God for us, then the Torah doesn't become rigid anymore. And it's not this arcane, inane, onerous thing. It's this beautiful, incredible guide. And I promise you with all my heart, and if I could, I would swear by God's name, that I view the Torah that way, and that was a journey for me. But I see it and feel it that way. I sat this afternoon for 2 hours by myself with my Gemara Sanhedrin, because I'm trucking through Sanhedrin right now, and I got from Daf Samech Daled to Samech Zayin. And I learned all about the Oiv, V'Yidaini, and the Mechashef, Avodah Zarah, Melech. It was so interesting. It was so awesome. And when I did it, I imagined, the guy who puts his feet up and he's busy eating the potato chips from the bag and he's flipping the channels with his shalat, remote control. I had more enjoyment than that guy in learning my Sanhedrin by myself. Who's forcing me to learn it? I'm not in Kollel. I'm a balabas. No one forces me to learn. I'm not in no Kollel that I have to do a certain hespek or I'm part of some sort of group. I'm just a solo guy who loves learning. Like that guy loves TV, I love learning even more. That's all. That's it. I sat, I enjoyed it. It was incredible. It was interesting. It was fascinating. It was uplifting. I felt good about myself afterwards. I got close to Hashem. It had the spiritual benefits, the physical benefits. So that's the truth. Work towards it. Know the truth. It's a hard journey to get to the truth, but it's worth it, and you could do it. And Hashem thinks you're so beautiful. You guys don't realize these conversations between the real people about their struggles. It's the Akenes Yitzchak of our generation. It's the greatest of the greatest and the most beautiful thing that there is. So Hashem loves you. You're so appreciated. You're so acknowledged. You're so incredible. You're amazing. Keep trucking. Keep going. It should get easier, and you should be zocha to rediscover the sweetness and the beauty of the Torah. Be well.